All right. This is the last game that I will be breaking down tonight. Indiana versus Ohio State. You know, even in the second quarter when Ohio State started to break this game open, it was still kind of a good game. It was 14-7. But Indiana lost this game in ways you don't want to lose a game. You don't want to lose a game because of your special teams. When you lose a game, when you start losing on special teams, it can almost negate everything you're doing on offense. It can negate how you're trying to win on offense. Indiana, for them to win this game, they were going to need to kind of have one of those back and forth jab fests where, all right, we got 4 yards on that play. Only 2 yards there, but let's see if we can get 3. Damn, can't get 3 there. We'll punt it, but we're going to play good defense and so on and so forth. But they couldn't keep that up. Ohio State was able to win on every side of the ball. Ohio State was able to win on offense, they were able to win on defense, and they were able to win on special teams. When they needed it on defense, 0. Came through multiple sacks in the first half. Gave Rourke and Indiana hell. Indiana didn't make any adjustments either. Didn't see them try to get Rourke any kind of protection upon them seeing that they weren't getting any. Didn't see them try to move him out of the pocket until literally the end of the game. Didn't make any sense. Indiana couldn't really stretch the field, even though they were trying to, and they did get a couple of penalties on Igbinosa, which made sense. You know, they had an approach. They had somebody that they were targeting. But it's just hard to keep these things up when you're punting the ball and you fumble. You punt the ball and you outkick your coverage. That's not really something you want to blame your punter for. But, you know, nobody's able to get a hand on Caleb Downs, and he runs it, and he gets a punt return. These things hurt. 14 points. You take off the 14 points that Ohio State got strictly off of special teams. They didn't score off of the fumble when the punter fumbled the ball, but they scored literally just right after. But take those 14 points away, and you are looking at 24-15. And Indiana's in that game. And if they're in that game, then they play that whole fourth quarter completely differently. Just going over the numbers a bit, Ohio State, you know, they doubled them up on total yards with their 316 to Indiana's 151. Passing yards, 201 to Indiana's 68. Rushing yard, 115 to Indiana's 83. I mean, and here's where you win. Ohio State were averaging a first down with every 2 touches, 5.7 yards per touch, whereas Indiana was at 2.6. They struggled to really make anything shake. Yet, and still, Indiana had more first downs than Ohio State. But that goes right into the argument that I made where Ohio State didn't have to beat Indiana on offense. They just had to be pretty good on offense. They won on special teams. They won on defense. They were able to turn the ball over on downs on defense. And simply just being able to turn the ball over on downs, you don't need Rourke to throw an interception because, hell, they got to punt the ball. And that's just as good because we getting the ball back. And, hell, the punt didn't even get to us because your punter fumbled. Okay, this punt got to us, but then our return man returned it. Ohio State won in they had bright spots, and their bright spots outshined Indiana's grit, determination, their courage, their want to. And, you know, you're not going to win the game if you can't win at least 2 of the 3 phases. Indiana didn't win on defense, they didn't win on offense, and they didn't win on special teams. They didn't win on any single phase of the game. Indiana won this game in the first quarter, and then after the first quarter, Ohio State started playing, and Ohio State never looked back. Ohio State took care of Indiana. I, saw Cignetti saying how, he absolutely believes they should still be in the college football playoff run. Probably simply based on the fact they're ranked 5, and this is their first loss of the season. And even if you move them back, you're going to move them back 3, 4, 5 spots. They're ranked 10th, and maybe they just get one of those last bids. So they probably end up getting one of those spots where they go and they're the away team, as opposed to one of those situations where Ole Miss would have been coming to their house. But I'll just say this. Indiana is a good team against a lot of bad teams. They haven't won any good games. They did beat Michigan. They struggled here against Ohio State. But the Big Ten has been a struggling conference in general. It's not as competitive as, say, the Big 12 has been. It's not as competitive as the SEC has been. So the Big Ten is very top-heavy, very bottom-heavy. Couple teams in the middle, couple teams in the middle that are like teams you don't want to play against. You don't want to play against Minnesota. because they're going to just play you too tough, and it's just a potential loss in the air. You don't really want to play against Penn State, even though Penn State doesn't have any convincingly good wins. Interesting that Penn State didn't play against Oregon. Interesting that Penn State didn't play against Indiana. Maybe they didn't think Indiana would be good. But interestingly enough, Penn State, I don't have a stat in front of me, but they probably have one of the weaker schedules of anybody. The Big Ten in general just is not one of the best conferences. And maybe they don't know that that's what they're going to be at the start of the season. People started the season off with Michigan ranked, So you're looking at the Big Ten like it's going to be the Big Ten and it's going to be popping. But they're top heavy. Penn State has been able to just continue to win while SEC teams cannibalize each other and beat each other while they're in the top 10. You got teams like Penn State who beat USC and beat, Minnesota and beat it's hard to even think of some of the names of these teams, honestly. Purdue, and they just win the games that is next up, which is important. But they win those games. And one thing that potentially happens when they win those games is they just continue to build an identity that they're a winning ball club. And, maybe as they move on down the line that, that starts to show itself. But regardless of the fact, I do think Indiana stays in the picture. I do think, and I think the College Football Playoff Committee is going to want them in the picture. I think they're going to want a team that has only one loss, a team that's a part of a big conference. And I don't think there's that many teams that can replace them. The teams that could have replaced them were teams like BYU, Colorado, because they was next up. They was the ones that were right there on that cusp. But both of them lose. The Big 12 is in kind of a competitive disarray spot. So don't really know which one of those teams are going to come out of there. So don't really know how to crown any one of those teams because neither of those teams have made themselves the leader of that conference. So that's where you get Boise State getting a bye. And that's where teams are going to start, it's going to be chaos because you got Texas and Texas A&M next week. And ultimately, Indiana loses big. And Ohio State, in my opinion, put up another touchdown against Indiana at the end of the game instead of kneeling because Ohio State's finding its legs. Ohio State just beat a ranked opponent and they wanted to beat them good. They wanted to beat them badly. And I think that's why Ohio State took that last touchdown, even though they didn't have to, because they want to be able to make a case for why they are the number 2 ranked team in the nation. I would like to start seeing some cross-pollination. I would like to start seeing Big Ten play at least one SEC team a season. Don't care which one. I don't care which one. I don't care if you put Arkansas on the schedule. I don't care if you put Vanderbilt, Kentucky. I don't care. Start cross-pollinating. SEC, you got to play one Big Ten team. SEC, you got to play one Big 12 team. Big 12, you got to play. I'm gonna talk about that in my 2-minute drill. But Indiana, Ohio State, Indiana gets spanked. I think it's a spanking they needed to have. We're gonna find out how good their coaching is come next game because they didn't make any adjustments in this game. So gonna find out if they can make adjustments, but not gonna know whether or not they get a chance to play Ohio State again, if those adjustments are gonna matter. We'll see if this game tape ends up hurting Indiana and if somebody's able to see what Ohio State did and put that into play against Indiana. But again, they lost in some ways that I think they can clean up. They can absolutely clean up their punt coverage. They can absolutely clean up their punter dropping a pass. It was a little wet. It was cold out there as well. So tough game for Indiana. Very tough game. But chaos continues. And we're in a good space. Ohio State now just needs to beat Michigan. I think Ohio State is in that bag where they're going to go into this game ready to destroy Michigan. I suspect Ohio State beats Michigan by good 2-3 touchdowns. And I think they just make their case as to why they are the Big Ten team to beat. The Big Ten title game is going to be huge, 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 huge. Ohio State can still earn themselves a first-round bye, and nobody's really talking about it because everybody's just watched Oregon beat up on everybody. And, well, not everybody, but everybody's just kind of watched Oregon win out, and it just feels like Oregon is clearly the best team in college football. These teams are getting better or they're getting worse. Nobody stays the same. Oregon doesn't just get to stay as the most dominant team. Just because they're ranked number 1 doesn't mean that they are going to be number 1 throughout this entire season. Oregon is very likely, they're very capable of losing to Ohio State in the Big Ten title game and ending up finding themselves in an unfavorable matchup possibly at home. It'll probably be a home game. They'll find themselves in a 5, 6, 7, 8 spot playing against a team like Georgia and then potentially being kicked out of the playoffs. Not saying that will happen, but let's just be real. Ohio State is finding themselves right now. I think they are catching their stride, and I think they're figuring out how to win games aside from just our weapons on offense. If Ohio State can continue to do that, if Ohio State can go into this game against Michigan next week and they're able to get sacks, multiple sack game, 3 sack, 4 sack game, like they did this game, if they're able to get a strip sack, if they're able to score on defense or score on special teams, you know that you're going to be seeing an Ohio State team that's different and that's peaking at the right time. I think they're starting to peak right now. I think it's just starting to show, genuinely. And sometimes you need games against tough opponents, opponents that are ranked well, so that you can test your grit, your will, your capability. You need this, okay? You can't just keep going against Middle Tennessee State and then winning 72-7, and people just because you're winning these big games. Like, no. You got to win games that people think you're not supposed to. Win games that people say you should, but it'll be close, and then dominate so that people can start to build up who they see you as. But you got to make that clear. Ohio State absolutely made that clear today. So I am so looking forward to Ohio State, Michigan next week. I know Michigan's not ranked, but you know Michigan going to come out and try to give Ohio State everything they got. You know there's a lot of spirit, a lot of culture in that game. There's a lot of story in that game in general that's going to make that game bigger in the rankings. Michigan absolutely has a chance to play spoiler, same way the Gators have been playing spoiler, same way Kansas Jayhawks have been playing spoiler. It's there for the taking. Ohio State is peaking at the right time. Who knows what we're going to get in this college football playoff / championship. I can't wait to do my bracket. Listen, if you made it to this part of the video, thank you so much. I would appreciate it even more if you decided to subscribe. Can't tell you how much it means to me. Just any support that watchers, viewers do give, because this is really more so an opportunity for me to express myself. I'd be frustrated watching these games. I'd be frustrated because I don't get to play no more. I'm not making any calls. And I just get stuck watching the team who I'm rooting for make terrible call after terrible call, or make no call and expect to win and be mad at the refs, but you ain't do nothing to win. So this is something that honestly is good for me, good for my spirit. It's good for me to find a way to spend my time and exercise my skill set, whether that be with filming or editing. And I'm just really glad to be able to enjoy watching these games that I do love and breaking them down. I will be breaking down quite a few games from my breakdowns, so keep an eye out for that. If you subscribe, you will be notified right away, though, so you won't necessarily have to keep an eye out for it. As soon as you go to YouTube, you'll see it, or you ain't even got to go to YouTube because you'll probably just get an email notification. But all right, y'all, I'm out of here. Listen, like I said, thank you so much for watching and for sticking it out with me. Good week of football. Man!